Još malo?
Ja sam počela rekordat.
Da, pa to ti je bolje da ne zaboraviš i onda samo brišeš i
Da.
nema šta. Ok, ljudi lagano dolaze. A gledaj, ovo će ti pikat, znaš, pikat će ti negdje na 100 i neće preći tako. Ali to će pikat, recimo, najveći će pik biti jedno 10-ak minuta od početka i onda će tako. Ali nama je najvažnije da mi imamo 200 mailova. Ono što je bila zanimljiva analiza, koliko je od tih 200, koliko je novih, razumiješ? I sad kad ti gledaš što je tebi, dobro nisu svi novi, ali od tih 200, XY ti je ono, potencijalnih leadova koje možda nisi imao.
Pa mislim kad sam unosila listu u Campaign Monitor da mi je reklo da je 40 i nešto kao potpuno novih mailova. Kao da se ne preklapa s ničim.
A si ih dodala, znači?
Pa jesam kad sam ih iskludala, kužić iz ovog drugog newslettera.
Dobro, ali samo ćeš mi sljedeći newsletter onda poslati njima.
Da.
Pa to je super, ono, znači 40 novih ljudi, ok, malo nešto moramo odraditi, ali mislim da kad smo uhodali da nemamo tu puno posla.
Da.
Mislim, ove sve prezentacije bi mi trebali manje više imati uvijek. To si ti tako vukla iz onog, jel?
Da.
Ono glavnog.
Pa je, nešto od tamo, nešto sam dodala, dopunila malo, ono, da mi promijeniš i tako. Bila mi je baza to, da.
Okay. Dobro, znači uglavnom sad kad ćeš krenut, da, moraš samo stisnuti ovo Start Broadcast i u tom trenu pričekaš par sekundi da ti čućeš nešto da ova teta govori broadcast starting i možeš početi govoriti, ja ću se ono s tobom isto kad me najaviš ću pozdraviti, čisto da to i eventualno ću te javiti ako nešto reći, prekinut ću te ono ako nešto nije. Dobro, ali zvuk se dobro čuje, znači nemaš ti tu šta, tako da ja ću pratiti ako neko bude ima neki problem, pitanje i tako. Ja ću se mute dok me ne pozoveš kao ono da se pozdravim.
Da, ok.
Ćao.
Ajde. Hello and welcome everybody. I hope you can hear me well. My name is Maya and today I will assist Tony in guiding you through this webinar. We are going to show you how you can manage SharePoint permissions with our tool SPDocKit. So let me just quickly introduce ourselves and our company to all of you. So Tony is today here with me. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Maya.
So Tony is a co-founder and a CEO of Acceleratio, and he has been a Microsoft MVP for 6 years. And I like to present him as a mastermind who stands behind our tool SPDocKit along with our team. And Tony will be in charge for demo and use cases today. And my name is Maya. I work as a product marketing manager for SPDocKit here at Acceleratio. Acceleratio is a software development company based in Zagreb in Croatia, Europe. And we create tools for system administrators, for SharePoint administrators and consultants, and Office 365 administrators and consultants. And we have been present at the market since 2009. And during these 7 years, we've gathered more than 2,000 customers all over the globe. And among them, you can find some of the world's largest corporations, and as you can see on this slide, which of course makes us very proud. Let's jump to a quick overview of our product family. As you can see here, currently we offer 4 products. You will meet today SPDocKit. This is our SharePoint administration tool. Except SPDocKit, you can try CloudKit 365, which Office 365 administrators use to gather documentation and to monitor Office 365 environments. Then we have a SysKit, which is a Windows monitoring tool that helps you monitor and manage your Windows environment, servers, virtual machines, and workstations. And our latest product is SQLDockit. SQLDockit is created to help you out to discover SQL servers in your domain. Also, it creates documentation and much more. Okay, let me just quickly lead you through our agenda today. At the beginning, I will explain you quickly how you can ask questions. Then we will give you a short overview of SPDocKit features. We will explain to you how you can use permission reports, its management actions, and compare Vizard. And then Tony will continue with the demo. And at the end of the webinar, you will hear what is coming soon with SPDocKit, and we will answer some of your questions. So recording of this webinar and the slide deck will be available, of course. We will publish it on our blog, and we will notify you via email. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to ask your questions. You have to use the GoToWebinar application on your right side, and you have the questions and answer box. Just type your question inside of it, and at the end of the demo, we will answer some of your questions. And if we won't have enough time, other questions will be answered on our blog. Okay. So let's start with a quick overview of our tool. As I already said, SPDocKit is a SharePoint administration, management, and governance tool, and it helps you with your day-to-day tasks and operations. Its key feature and its first feature that we developed is the ability to generate SharePoint farm documentation, which provides you a very detailed overview of all farm system and configuration settings. I'd say that this is the ultimate time-saving feature of SPDocKit because documentation is really essential for every administrator, and it saves hours and hours of manually pasting data from different sources. Additional group of features is created around this one, and it helps you audit your farm more closely. You can use SPDocKit to monitor farm health, to track changes, to compare farms, web applications, site collections, and permissions, create numerous content and usage reports to get a better control over your SharePoint environment. When we are talking about auditing your farm, I have to mention best practices reports, which help you audit your farm configuration according to Microsoft's and community's best practices. Well, once the SPDocKit gathers all of your farm settings in a snapshot, these reports can analyze your configuration and help you optimize your farm performance. You can use it to check if there are some areas where you can make some changes, check if there is something misconfigured, and so on. So what's important to mention here is that our reports are updated regularly, and currently, of course, we support SharePoint 2016 with these reports. You can also edit the values in these reports and create your own. The last thing that I would like to mention in this overview are governance features. You can use SPDocKit to set up SharePoint rules very easily and implement them on various targets, such as site collections, sites, lists, or document libraries, of course. Queries and rules help you enforce your governance policies across your SharePoint farm, such as enabling document versioning, finding checked out files, examining other settings for document libraries, and so on. So this was my quick overview of all SPDocKit features. And now we are moving on to permissions and a much detailed overview of these SPDocKit capabilities. So Tony, the spotlight is now all yours, and feel free to continue.
Thank you, Maya. I'm just going to switch to my screen. Just hold for a second, guys. Here, let me switch to my screen and let me fire up the presentation. So everything seems to be okay, so we can continue. So my task today is to explain permissions part of SPDocKit. So as Maya said, we initially started as a documentation tool, which pretty much generates an inventory of a SharePoint farm or your SharePoint farms. And then we expanded by additional abilities to document and at the end to manage permissions in SharePoint. As you all know, managing SharePoint permissions can be a very complex task, and the built-in tools in some areas are lacking some features that we as third-party vendors are providing, and we are helping you to be more efficient and to create reports that are not available out of the box, or to just perform some tasks that would otherwise take a very long time with the tool and just be more efficient in doing your tasks. So I'm just going to do a quick intro. I'm going to show you all the features that we have in the tool, and then we are going to jump straight into demo. I have a lot of small demos that I want to show you today, and if anything you want to learn more about, you just feel free to contact us and we will do a personalized demo for you for that particular feature that is troubling you in your environment. Okay, so when it comes to permissions, we have two components. The initial component is the ability to show you reports. So we can gather every permission for every object in SharePoint, depending on the settings that you have chosen. But pretty much most of the clients that we work with go down deep down to gather permissions on an individual list item level. And this goes up to folders and then document libraries, sites, site collections, and on top of that, the entire farm. So basically, we can get all these permissions, and you will be able to document and view information about that. The second part of our tool is the ability to manage permissions. So we can do some basic stuff that SharePoint can do as well. So we can create groups and grant permissions, but we can also do some more complex stuff like cloning permission, transferring permission from one user to another, and things like that, and then do all these things automatically across different sites and site collections. So you can speed up your day-to-day tasks in a significant manner if you choose to work with SPDocKit. So as I said, reporting is the key component. We give you this information on various levels. You can use our built-in tool that we call Permissions Explorer to dig deep and get information about on any single level that you're interested in. And we help you with various kinds of reports, drill down reports, and other stuff that can be useful for you to pinpoint to exact report or exact object that you want to report on. There are very different levels of reports. As you can see on the right-hand side, there is a screenshot from our user interface where you can see all the major reports that we have in our tool and that you can use to create reports. It's very complex. Some clients want us to provide everything as a printed document, as a PDF or Excel docx file. That can be very tricky because some clients have millions of records in their SharePoint databases, and then creating a printed file would be very, very complicated, and this file would be really huge. So that's why we have divided the reports into various sections. So when you are trying to find out how your SharePoint is configured, you can use any of these reports to detect some particular setting that has been set in your environment. I'm going to show you most of these in my demos, so please hold for a moment and let's go and see them live. So we have different kinds of reports, so you can expand them hierarchically to view permissions in a site collection. So that's one it's in the middle. So this one is showing me my site collection and then permissions that have been granted on individual levels. But I can also see that from a different perspective. That's the left-hand side report that shows me the ability to see permissions that were granted to a single user. In this case, I'm seeing a report for a single user, and I'm able to see where this particular user has permissions and how he has been granted these permissions. We also have a set of cleanup reports, and cleanup reports help me to be more efficient into providing information about some users that are disabled and do not work for our company anymore, so I need to clean these users from my site collections. Or this can also detect some objects that are not used anymore, like empty groups and things like that. So we have a lot of different reports that help people be more efficient in administrating their SharePoint environment. As I said, we also have built-in manage permissions, so there are many different options that you can use to connect to SharePoint and do various stuff. I'm going to show you most of these in my demos, so I think most of them are pretty self-explanatory. So you can grant permissions, remove permissions, do cloning, move people between groups, add groups and stuff like that. So you can use a lot of these operations to clean your SharePoint, because as the time goes, a lot of permissions are given to different people, and then as the time goes and as your SharePoint matures, there's like more and more permissions, and this like becomes a mess after some time. So if you want to keep it clean and be more efficient, it's always good to do some cleaning of permissions and grouping your users that have same permissions to groups and stuff like that. So there are many best practices that you can follow, and I think when you see the demos, you will see how efficient you can be when managing permissions with SPDocKit. So what also we have is something we call the permission wizard. So in certain situations, like cases where you need to grant permission to a user or to a group of users to a number of different site collections. So in case you want to do that in SharePoint UI, you would have to go individually site collection by site collection and giving permissions. But what we can help you with here is we can you can start a wizard that we have, and then you can grant permission to this particular user to a number of different site collections. So you can speed up things a little bit here and add this user to a number of site collections, but it's just going through our wizard. And I'm going to show you that as well. So you'll see how efficient I am when I'm using a wizard to perform an operation on different site collections. We can also offer you the ability to connect to SharePoint Online. So we have different licensing models, and one of the licensing models is something we call a SharePoint Workstation that can be used to connect to a SharePoint Online. That's, of course, that one is not in your organization, and then you can connect to SharePoint Online and see the same reports and perform these operations for your SharePoint Online installation. You can also connect to a SharePoint that is in your organization as well, SharePoint on-prem. So if you don't have access to SharePoint server, you cannot RDP there, and you are just, let's say, site collection admin, you can use this to install it on a workstation that's in the same domain as SharePoint, and then connect to your SharePoint on-prem and do a management of SharePoint permissions, which can be a very effective way to give the tool to people that are not farm administrators, but only manage a single site collection or a number of site collections in terms of permissions and other stuff related to the site collection. So you can give them the tool just to work on permissions. So that's why we have the workstation to help site collection administrators perform these permission management tasks from the tool. Once we gather all this information regarding permissions, and once we know about your structure, we can help you with some other things. So if you configure the tool to create something we call a snapshot, or if you create a snapshot by clicking on the button, you will have a history of permissions as you go through time. So I'll be able to compare what happened to a site today and how the permissions have changed since yesterday. So I can do comparison, and if somebody calls me and says, you know, this user had permission and he was able to access the site yesterday, but today he's getting access denied. What changed? What happened here? I can use the compare tool to just compare these two sites or these two snapshots in time and display this to myself so that I can troubleshoot this. I can also use compare wizard to do some cleaning. If I want to have two site collections that are pretty much serving the same set of users, I can then rearrange permissions in one to make them as similar as possible so that I can reduce an overhead of administration to completely different sets of groups and stuff like that. So it can be very useful to, let's say, do a little bit of CSI over permissions and see what is going on and how permissions are different. I know somebody's going to ask, can we do audit as well? So that's something we are working on, and I hope in one of the next releases we are going to improve the compare wizards with additional features that are going to help you not just detect differences, but also see who has made the change on permissions, when and why this has happened, and so you will be able to troubleshoot some problems that you might have with permissions that were changed without proper authorization or that caused some problems for your organization. So we have the two flavors when it comes to permission compare. You can either compare two objects, so two completely different objects. So compare site permissions to another site permissions, or site permissions with file permissions, whatever. So we can compare all these things. And then we also have something we call differences compare, permission differences compare. And in this case, you can compare same object over time and see how this object changed as we go. Everything that we do, so this is important if you have a compliance in your company and you want to track everything that's happening. So we are logging everything that SPDocKit does in event log, so you will be able to trace how SPDocKit changed some permissions so that you can be sure that everything is okay and that there are no problems, or that you know who made a particular change in your organization. Okay, and that leaves me to demos. So I'm just going to open up my demo environment here. Okay. And I'm just going to show you my demo environment. So what we have here is my SPDocKit in front of you. So I'm just going to go through my site and show you everything that I planned for today. And I'm going to mention a lot of these things that we have seen in the presentation now in the actual demo. So in this case, I mentioned that we have a workstation installation available. In this case, I'm on the actual server. So this is installed on the SharePoint server, and I'm looking at our SPDocKit console. SPDocKit is a Windows-based application, so it's like a full-blown application, and I have connected to this server via RDP, and I'm directly here, and I'll be managing permissions from this workstation. In some other demo, I would be able to do that as well on my PC, on my workstation, and do pretty much most of these things from when it comes to managing permissions from my workstation. So I'm just going to fire up the main tool for today, and that is Permission Explorer. So I'm just going to click here on the button, and this one is going to load stuff from my SharePoint. So in my case, what I have here is on the left-hand side, I have a navigation that looks like, let's say, Windows Explorer, and what you see on your screen now is I have 6 different web applications. So my site host, portal home, SharePoint, SharePoint Central Admin, SharePoint 82, SharePoint 81. So all of these are web applications. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand my number 82 web application, and this is going to show me 6 different site collections. So I have different site collections, and today I'm going to focus on my permission demo site collection, so PMD. I'm going to expand that, and as I expand, you will see that I have a lot of sites located in this site collection. So I have some sites that are dedicated to different cities, and you will see that, for example, Amsterdam and San Francisco and Stockholm and Toronto, they'll have only the green icon. And then we have London, Los Angeles, and Paris. They have the green icon with a small red square. So as you can see, Amsterdam is a subsite, and London is a subsite with unique permissions. So that means that somebody has broken permissions on London level, and London has the different permissions than the other ones in this thing, so in this site collection. So for example, Amsterdam, when I open that, the SPDocKit informs me that this particular object inherits permissions from the parent. So if you would like to manage permissions from Amsterdam site, you would have to go to your root of your site collection and then manage permissions here. If I wanted to manage permissions from London, I would just need to go to London and then do perform whatever change that I want to do. So in this case, I have different scopes, so I can either make changes on the site collection level, and then this is going to apply to all the sites that inherit permissions, or I can just go to London, LA, Paris, and then make changes here. So what I want to do now is I want to grant permissions to a Active Directory group. So the thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to click Grant Permissions. And then I have a people picker here, and I'm going to type, I have a sales and marketing team, and I'm just going to search for that particular group. And it's going to show me my sales and marketing team. You will notice that there are different colors for these objects. So in SPDocKit, if you see green small people, they are not from ours, they are Active Directory group. And if you see red people, they are SharePoint group. And if you see just an orange guy, well, that's a user. So that's how we differentiate between different objects so that you know what exactly this particular item is. Of course, there is a hover, so every time you go above the icon, it's going to show you. I know that you guys cannot maybe follow all these colors that we have, but we are very familiar with our tool, so we know. But in this case, this is an AD group, and I'm going to add this AD group to another group on this site, and this is equipment group, and this equipment group is a SharePoint group. I see that from the red icon. So if I do that, I'm going to give this members of this AD group, I'm going to give them full control because equipment group has full control on this particular site. I could potentially do something else. I can give permission directly, grant permission directly by choosing an appropriate permission level for this group. But in this case, I have chosen to just add them to this group. So I'm just going to click here, and the system is going to apply all the changes, and my sales and marketing team will be added to the equipment group. So if I expand that, I'll see that they're right here now, and this is the key difference between what you can do in SharePoint UI versus what you can do in SPDocKit. Here you can expand AD groups, and you can see the members of these groups. So in my case, I have a couple of people that are members of the marketing team, sales and marketing team, and I also have some other groups, AD groups, that are members of that group. So this can get very complex. So as you can see, as I am expanding, I get more and more people who actually have access to my site just because they are members of members and members. And this goes pretty much almost unlimited because they are members of this group, this particular AD group. And here is the hover. So if you're not sure what some colors mean in SPDocKit, so you can always hover. I hope that you're seeing this on your screen, but there is a small information that gives you info that this is an AD group. So this is very useful when you're trying to figure out, okay, how is this user getting permission and how he can access this site. Well, easy, because he might be a member of an AD group or another AD group that's inside of this group. So this can get very complex. I'll show you a different report where you can see how user gets permissions, and then we will show you all the stuff that all the groups that this user is member of and things like that. So if I go here, or for example, if I show the properties for Eva Owens, I can see all her information. So she is an AD user, she has an enabled account, and she is member of all these groups. So in her case, she is only member of domain users and a couple of other groups. But we would be listing all the groups that she is a member of, and if you have some troubleshooting to do and you need to find out the members of a particular group, you can do it from SPDocKit. The only thing that you cannot do right now is if you want to change membership of AD groups and stuff like that, you would still need to go to your AD and then do these changes over there. So we are just, when it comes to AD, we are reading, we are providing all the information that you need, but we are not making any changes to your AD structure. You would have to do that in the AD. I can apply same info operation for any group. So for example, if I have a SharePoint group, I'll see all the members of that SharePoint group, or if I have an AD group, I can see all the members of this particular AD group and things like that. So this group has members, and the group is also a member of another group. So I can trace this information if I need to and troubleshoot stuff for this particular AD group. You will also notice that there is a guy here, Lutsky, who is like a gray. He has a gray icon. So this is a special type of user. that has been disabled in the Active Directory. So when somebody leaves a company or something changes or whatever, he might be disabled in the Active Directory, and that means that this user is no longer able to log in because the AD is not going to allow that. For SharePoint stuff, that means that if has been granted permissions directly, this user has been granted permissions directly, the record is still going to stay there. So if you have an organization where there's like a lot of changes of people and people are coming and going all the time, you might end up with a lot of disabled users. So what we're trying to do here and what we are trying to help you with is we try to visually indicate that you do have some users that are disabled. So if this is a permanent disabled user, so if this user has left the company, you might want to remove these users so that you don't clutter your permissions and your screens with unuseful information. So that's why we are helping you. I'm going to show you in just a couple of minutes how you can clean all these users automatically, so you can remove them without going through them one by one. I showed you the grant permission button. There's also other buttons that allow you to create groups and add people to groups. You can also use the tools to remove somebody. So if I want to remove Eva Owens from my site, I just need to click here, remove, and she will be removed, or her permission will be removed from this site. So if she's not a member of another group, she will not be able to log in anymore at this time. So if I have removed somebody, he or she will not be able to come to the site anymore. What I can also do is something that can be problematic from time to time. So I can manage site collection administrators. So in this case, I can change the primary and secondary administrator, and I can also manage the membership of the site administrators group. So these are the people that have full control pretty much on your entire site collection. And it doesn't really matter if they have been granted the permission directly or not. Just being a site collection administrator means that they do have access. So this is something that you need to control, and if you have SPDocKit, you can use this particular Vizard to grant some other people permissions to be site collection administrators. So I don't want to change that right now, so just going to close that. If you see on the your right-hand side, we are providing you with some useful filters that can help you filter out information on the screen. So sometimes you are looking for somebody and you cannot find this particular user. So for example, if I want to show only users and I'm not concerned about groups, I can just filter out, and then the report is going to adapt and it's going to show me only users and not groups and stuff like that. So if I, for example, looking for, let's say I want to see all the users that have been granted permission directly, so not by using a group, but they were just given permission directly to this site, this is how I can find them easily. And now if this is something that I want to remove, I can just select all of them and then just remove their permissions. Or if these users have a same permission level or they need to do the same tasks, I can move them to a group that has this particular object permission and things like that. So I can clean my interface, SharePoint interface, from all these groups and all these users, but just moving them and arranging them into different groups that do have same permissions. So it can be a much more better place to manage once you clean all these users that have been granted permission directly and things like that. Okay, so this is about filters. I can now show you, for example, if I go to San Francisco. So we already said that this particular object inherits permissions from its parent. What I can do if I revert this filter, we have a break permission inheritance button. If I click here, it's just going to break permissions for me, and now San Francisco also has unique permissions. And now I can manage this. So for example, if I want to do something with this site, I can just choose these users, and then for example, if I want to clean the reports here, I can choose a couple of users, and then I can just remove them. So I'm building some other permission levels here. I can create some new groups, and then this is completely unconnected with the remaining of the site. So if San Francisco, for some reason, has different permission level sets and stuff like that, and they need different groups, I can do this and manage from here. Okay, so this concludes some basic operations that I can do on site collection level. So I said already that you can go any level. So if I go to subsite, I can expand this, and then I go to a document library that has unique permissions, and then we have a document library, and then we have a folder here, and then I have some documents or some list items here. So I can manage all these stuff on any given level. So there are different people here that have permissions, and I can then manage this from my SharePoint UI. We are helping you by providing a visual structure of your site collection so that you can easily go through different levels, and if somebody calls you and they are not sure what's going on, you can use the tool to pinpoint and see who exactly has permissions on a particular level. If you need to go to SharePoint, we have built-in buttons that help you just to click on them, and then you can jump directly into your SharePoint interface to see this document, to read it, and then to maybe decide who should or should not have access to this particular site collection. I already mentioned that on top of these built-in operations that you can perform, we have something that we call permission wizards. So these wizards, if I click here, are going to perform similar operations, but they're going to do that on multiple different places. So for example, if I want to grant permissions, so I'm just going to go to my manage option, and I want to grant permissions to Mary Cruz. So I'm just going to choose where is this going to happen. So I want to choose my SharePoint Intranet 82 site web application, and I need to configure this. So I'm going to choose that my user Mary will be granted permission to all the sites that contain that have the name called Paris. So in your case, that will probably going to be something like sales or documents or whatever, audit. So for example, if you have somebody who's come to do some audit, you can do this by filtering out some particular sites. If you have a naming convention, you can also use some other stuff, like for example, if you want to grant a user permission to all the document libraries and things like that, you can use the template criteria to find all the document libraries and things like that. So in my case, I'm just going to focus on Paris, and I'm going to give Mary Cruz permission to access this site. So I'm just going to change that. I'm going to choose full control. She's going to have full control of that permission, these sites. And then the system is going to do a little bit of searching. So it's going to find out how many Paris sites we have. So we have a Paris site in this site collection, and we have a Paris site in this site collection. So it's going to give me a preview. So this is a good time for you to check and double check if this is something that you want to do. And then I'll just click next, and then the system is going to make all the changes. So the system has made 2 changes. She has been granted permissions, and from now on she can access that site, and she will be able to connect and see the data inside of that particular site. I can use other things as well. So I can use wizards to break and restore permissions. So if I want to create break permissions and create unique permissions for all the sites that are called audit, I can do that. I can create groups. I can clone permissions, manage them, and very other different things. So, for example, if you want to grant somebody to become a site collection administrator on multiple site collections, and if you want to speed up things a little bit, you can just use this wizard to grant this user permissions to a zillion site collections that you might have in your organization. One other thing that I already mentioned is the ability to perform cleanups. So if I want to find out all the disabled users, so I just need to select my site collection, and then let's just select awesome computers. And you'll see here it's listing me people that might be orphaned for this particular site collection. And this site collection does not have access, people do not have access anymore. So we have one user that has been disabled, this one, and we have other users that don't have access anymore. So they either had access before, or they created some documents and stuff like that, but they don't have access anymore to this site collection. So this might be a problem or something that you need to clean up and see what's going on here. One thing that I forgot to show you initially, and I think it's very interesting, is our ability to clone stuff. So if I go back to my root of my site collection, and I have a user here who has some permissions, and if I want to transfer permissions of this particular user to another one, so you have basically two major use cases here. So either Joel, we have him here, another person was hired to perform his job, so there will be like two persons doing the same job, and you're not sure what kind of permissions this user has, and you just use clone in that particular case to duplicate the permissions that Joel has to somebody else. So for example, if I do that, so I have Joel here, and I want to duplicate his permissions, and I want to give Mary Cruz the same permissions as Joel, I'll just use that, and all the permissions will be transferred from Joel and applied to Mary as well. So the system will just go through all your objects in your site collection, and then permissions are going to be applied to this user as well. There is another case very similar to this one when you want to transfer permissions. So let's say Joel has left the company, or it was even better, he has left and went to work with a different department. And if you are in a strictly controlled industry where there's like audits and stuff, you don't want to allow this person to be able to access all the old sites and all the old documents and stuff like that. So you just want to transfer permissions. So if I want to transfer all the permissions and leave Joel without any particular permission, I can then transfer this to, let's say, Eva Owens was hired to perform work instead of Joel here. And I'm just going to choose, and then he is going to be removed, and she will be given permissions for instead of him, and she will be able to work on that particular set of documents and set of sites that he was working on. Okay, so this pretty much concludes what are basic options of our site permission explorer, where you can manage and see permissions as you go. I forgot to mention that everything that we have seen is live, so I have been connected to my SharePoint all the time, and everything that I did was automatically applied to SharePoint. So everything that you have seen on the screen was alive, and data was coming from SharePoint as we were expanding the nodes in our permission explorer. We also have another set of reports, or another view on the data. That's something we call permission reports. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show you our snapshots. So SPDocKit can be configured to create a snapshot of your environment on a scheduled basis, or you can do that, or you can perform a snapshot manually. So I can click here, and if I were to click here, it would be created automatically. But I already did that, so I'm just going to open one of my snapshots. I'm just going to open this one. And if I click on permission reports, it's going to show me all the reports that we have for permissions. I'm just going to expand that a little bit so to show you how many reports we actually have. And now let's try to see some of the interesting stuff. So the first report I want to show you is I want to show you unique permissions reports. So I'm just going to filter out by a web application. I'm going to choose my desired site collection, and now you will see how this particular site collection looks like. So I have a lot of subsites, and what this report is showing me, it's showing me all the objects that do have unique permissions. So if you're performing any kind of audits, or if you are trying to find out where the permissions have been broken in your SharePoint, you can use the reports and then visualize this thing, and then analyze if Paris or Los Angeles or HR or any of these sites that are with the red small red icon and the red font should actually have unique permissions, or somebody made a mistake here, and this should not be like this. So this is something that you can analyze with SPDocKit and find out what exactly is going on. I can also show you some additional stuff. So if I go to For example, a sub-site permission details report. This particular report shows me how permissions are given on, let's say, London. So here I'm going to see detailed list of permissions for this particular subsite. So the system is going to gather all the groups, and now I have very detailed granular information about individual permissions, not just permission levels. I'm able to see who has add remove web parts permission, who can approve items, and who can browse directories. So this has been broken down by individual site, and I can see all the site collections, and I can see how this user got. So somebody was given permission directly, like these groups, but some other users were given permission by just joining them to a group. So I can trace that with a report like this one. We have different levels of this report, so we can do this for subsites, as I'm doing it right now. As you will see on your left-hand side, we also have list reports, where you can do this for lists. And we also have list item reports where you can do very similar stuff for list items. So if you're trying to find out who has permissions to an individual document, you would use a list item report to get that information and to see it in the system. I already mentioned that on top of SharePoint objects, we can also create a report for users. So when somebody asks you, okay, where does Mary Cruz have permission in SharePoint? So that is very hard to find out if you have multiple site collections and multiple sites and broken inheritance and all these things. So in this case, you would go to user permission overview and you would select the users. I'm just going to select Joel for this demo because he has a lot of permissions. So let's say Joel, and then the system is going to compute and find out where he has permissions. And in this case, he has a lot of full control permissions on different site collections, and he is able to connect to all these site collections. If I want to find out more details, I just need to select one single site collection, and then there is a drill button. If I click on the drill button, it's going to drill down, and now I'm going to see where this user has permissions. He has full control because he's a site administrator, and he also has some other permissions on different sites, like some people were given additional privileges for different sites. So this is how I can expand this, and I can see, okay, where exactly Joel has permissions? Well, this is how I do it, and then I can compare and see where exactly this user has permissions. We also have, on top of that, some other reports that can help you manage some other stuff. So for example, I can show you today the number of users per site. So when you are managing permissions, sometimes you need to find out how many users do you actually have. So what we can do from all the reports that we have in the system, we can compute that, and I can tell you that in our permission demo site collection, we have almost 600 people who were given permissions in this particular site collection. So that's something that can be useful when you're trying to find out how many people are actually using some of your sites. So we are also computing the number of active users to find out how many users are connecting to these sites, and we are trying to help you to see how often are these sites used and stuff like that, so that you can stay on top and see which of your site collections are actually needed, and maybe some of these are not needed anymore if all the users that were connected to this site were disabled at some point in time, so you might want to remove them or move them to archival, things like that. And when it comes to permission reports, one final report that you want to examine is something we call users with privileged access. This is very important because sometimes when you want to make sure that there is no data leaks or that your data is not jeopardized, you need to control who has access and who is actually your farm administrator. That's the top level. As you can see in our demo environment, this is not a very good practice. So we have too much farm administrators. So all these people are farm administrators. And then as you drill down, you will see that the system is showing for every individual site collection who is actually the site collection owner, who is the secondary, primary, and secondary administrator. So I can troubleshoot this and detect if somebody who is not supposed to has access to my data. So there are many different levels. So we have farm administrators, we have primary and secondary administrator, primary and secondary owner, and then the entire site administrators group. So these people do have pretty much uncontrolled access to your site collection. So you should definitely take a look at this and make sure that, for example, in your farm administrator, so what happens in my system, somebody added the built-in administrator. So these are the local administrators of the SharePoint farm to the farm administrator. So in my case, what we can do is we are expanding this group, and we are showing you all the users that are actually part of that group on the local computer. But you need to control that, and you need to make sure that only users that are actually needed are part of the farm administrators group. I already mentioned at the very beginning that compare is one of the options that can really help you when managing and working with permissions in SPDocKit. So just one final demo, what I want to show you is the compare wizard. So there are many different flavors of compare. We already had a webinar regarding some of these. Today I just want to focus on permissions. If I choose permissions compare wizard, it's going to give me two options, compare object to object or compare differences between different points in time. So in this case, I'm just going to quickly show you two different sites. I'm just going to compare them. So the system needs to expand, and it's going to offer me two different sites. On the left-hand side, I'm going to show you one of my sites in product permission management demo. I'm going to choose Paris, and then on the right hand side I'm just going to choose one of my previous snapshots. So let's say what happened since last week, and then I'm going to choose a different site, let's say London, and then I can compare. So of course these two sites are not equal, and of course there are differences, and the system is showing me that one set of groups do have permissions on the right hand side, and the left hand side there's different set of groups. If I had two similar sites, I would be able to compare that. So let's say that I want to compare London to London, and then the system is going to show me that I don't have any differences and that I have two identical sites, and everything is the same from the left-hand side, which is like a live system, and the right-hand side, that's the situation that we had a week ago. Okay, so this concludes the our webinar, our demos for today. I'm just going to jump into my slides just to finalize everything. So quickly, these are the best practices that we think you should follow with working with SharePoint. So when you have SPDocKit, it's much easier to use AD groups, which is a recommended way, because then you can just control membership of groups in one single place, and that's your AD. And then this same thing can apply to all the other systems that rely on your AD, like file shares or any other Microsoft servers or any third-party service that you have that actually use your Active Directory as an identity provider. So that's what you can do with groups. You can define groups on SharePoint site collection level using our tools. Always use groups when possible, so don't give permission directly unless that's really necessary. You can use SPDocKit to remove any unused stuff, so unused groups. So we will detect if groups don't have members, if groups don't have permissions, privileges on this particular site collection. So this can be very useful. You should definitely remove orphaned users. So I have shown you that I have some users that have been disabled. You can use that, and then that's going to be easier for you. If you are interested to learn more, I have another webinar, or already had another webinar, and the recording is available at this link. So you just need to go there and register, and you will be able to learn more about SharePoint permissions in general. When it comes to best practices, always try to break permissions at the top level. So if possible on site level, don't do it on the list level, because there are some SharePoint boundaries. They have been increased in SharePoint 2016, but still, having too many individual permission scopes. So for example, permission scopes on list item level, that's not recommended because it can slow up your performance. Always try to reduce or try to use unique permission, use existing groups to grant permissions. So that is always recommended without creating additional groups. You can also try to reduce as many to stay at as low. Don't create permission levels if you don't need them, so it's always recommended that you try to use existing ones. If you're creating a new permission level, I would definitely recommend that you don't create it from scratch, but try to copy from an existing one. So that would be in a case where you are not satisfied how, for example, what kind of permissions a contribute permission level has. So if you want to remove delete from contribute, you would have to create a custom permission level called contribute without delete, and then you would be able to create to grant permissions just to create stuff, not to delete. If you are restoring permissions, just make sure that you have double-checked what has happened, because in certain ways SharePoint is going to restore the entire chain downwards. So that means if you had subsites that also had the unique permissions, this is going to be overwritten, and then you will have problems because the permissions will change. So be very careful when you are restoring permissions and double-check after you have restored. When it comes to SPDocKit, here are some of the cool new features that are going to be released later next month, so in October. So we are going to release an updated monitoring. So we talked to many clients who had a need to have a better tool to monitor their systems, especially for ULS logs and event logs. So that's coming up in October. We are also adding some additional features that are going to allow you to export documentation to Excel. So some customers really have huge farms, and this is going to be very helpful to them. We are going to also expand documentation to document certificates. We have some new compare features for you. We also have some new cool best practices alerts that are going to alert you in case of some problems that you might have in your SharePoint. And we also are going to expand our Explorer features. So it's something we call Site Explorer. And you will be able to browse not just permissions and your sites, but also some other stuff like features and other things that are located in the SharePoint Site Explorer or SPDocKit Site Explorer. So if you want to learn more, just go to SPDocKit. You will be able to download trial and try it for yourself. If you are already a client, just ping us and we will try to help you as much as we can with your current implementation and try to figure out what's the best way to use SPDocKit for your environment. And that wraps up. So we can go to questions. Just to say, these are our contact numbers. So if you have any questions, you can just send us an email or contact our support, and we will do whatever we can to make you happy and to help you with your current problem. So Maya, I think we can go to questions now.
Yes, of course, Tony. We will just give Tony a few seconds so that he can go through our questions, and we will try to answer as much as we can.
Yeah,
okay.
So we have like maybe 5 minutes. So I'll just try to answer all of these that are like general ones and that can be applied to many different people. And then we are going to write a wrap up, as Maya said, on the blog, and if somebody has very specific permissions, then some specific questions, we are going to answer them directly via email and try to help them as much as we can. So Steve asks if we can show you the unique number of users that have been logged. Yes, we can, and we are doing that with help of SharePoint Web Analytics. It's a little bit trickier to configure that, but if everything has been configured properly on the SharePoint side, you will be able to get that with our tools. This is a different report from the one that I have just shown you today, but there is one that in the content and usage reports that helps you detect the number of users that actually connected. Okay. Country wants to know, if we removed orphaned users, does that remove the users from the SP content that has been created, like information by created by, modified by, and things like that? No. So if a disabled user created content and you remove permissions and clean the SharePoint clean this user from groups and stuff like that, the content that this user has created will be there and it will not be removed, and that metadata will stay there. What I also wanted to say, When it comes to orphaned users and orphaned content and things like that, we have one additional report that I didn't show you today, and that one detects if original author of a document or any kind of content in SharePoint is not active anymore. We can detect that as well. And you will be able to see maybe these documents are not needed anymore and they can be removed if these people moved on and these documents are not being used anymore. They might be using a lot of space and things like that. The only thing that I want to caution you and tell you, for some clients that work in environments that have Active Directories that are connected into forests of Active Directories, and that where you have multiple Active Directories, sometimes Active Directory do not provide us with proper information about status of this user. So I would recommend that you double check before deleting. We are adding some additional controls here to prevent any kind of problems, but make sure that you double check with your AD administrators before you proceed with removing users that might be false positives because of your Active Directory structure. Okay, Bruce wants to know what happens when you clone permissions and if the privileges of a person who is a destination, are we going to override his individual permissions? Yes. So when you're cloning, we are just completely removing permissions from the destination user, and we are copying everything from the original user. So there is a dialog that warns you about that, so just be sure that you know what you're doing. If you don't want to use clone as a full cloning and changing all the permissions, you can just use compare and see how these people have different permissions, and then just manually add using the Vizard's additional privileges. Okay. Anyway, so Tarek wants to know, is there a way to provide the site owner with the reports to be able to control their permissions? So Tarek, your site collection administrators, if they are not farm administrators, and in most cases they are not, I would recommend you to look into our workstation and then install the workstation on their personal workstation, PC, whatever, and then they will be able to connect to SPDocKit database, and you can also configure SPDocKit just to give them permission to view the reports for their site collections. We can respect SharePoint permissions in that regard, and then you can just very narrowly give them permission to view only the stuff they actually need to see. So this is very, very useful, and you can use the workstation for exactly this particular case. Okay. For Reza wants to know if we can, with SPDocKit, if we can manage external users. Yes, you can manage them in terms of changing their permissions and moving them to groups, but you will still need to use a SharePoint Online interface to grant them permission, because there is some background activities that need to be performed on Microsoft side, and for the first time you would still need to use a SharePoint Online built-in interface to create these reports. Okay. We do have a lot of questions, I'll tell you honestly. So there is no way I'm going to be able to answer all of them, and some of them I need to do a little bit of analysis before I even try to answer them. So,
okay, Tony, can I give one answer just quickly?
Okay.
Okay, Colin wants to know if we are going to make a webinar on governance functionality. Yes, we are planning to do that, and we will notify you via email. It will be soon in our schedule, and until then you can visit our blog and our video section where you can see a demo of our queries and rules. This is a new recording, so feel free to watch it. Okay, Tony, you can continue.
Okay, so I think we can wrap it up. So everybody that has asked any question, we will answer you individually, and for most questions we are going to publish them on blog as well if they are not very specific to your environment. So just stay tuned to your email. Maya is going to mail you tomorrow with the recording, the PowerPoint deck, and everything else that could be useful for you and managing permissions in SharePoint. So thank you so much and have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.